We're here today to have a dialogue about movement strategy, talk about some matters of common interest that maybe will interest you.
Well, we've been trying to plan this for 6 months, haven't we? So we've finally done it.
Should we turn for a minute to think about how this applies to being as genuinely inclusive as we can? Because this is part of the reason why I put forward this moderate flank idea. But one of the interesting things about it is it's one area where you and I have made some similar kinds of interventions in terms of trying to say to some of our colleagues in the movement, look, one of the things that we may be uncomfortable with, but we actually have to try to do, is to speak to people who do not share our politics, is to really be serious about moving beyond party politics and appealing, for example, to small c conservatives, is to make sure that people who are not signed up to an intersectionalist identity politics agenda don't feel by virtue of that, excluded from the climate movement, is therefore to be able to say to people, you don't have to think of yourself as woke to wake up to this crisis and this permanent emergency that we're in and actually step up to the plate and do something serious about it. How are you seeing that at this point, Roger, as we move into 2022, just end oil, the kind of post COP26 world? How can we get more traction? And by we here, I mean you and me, in terms of having this kind of difficult conversation with some of the people who might be watching this video?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting challenge, I think, because as I said initially, there's one of the major confusions around the climate crisis is the nature of the political, to use a slightly technical turn of phrase. But there's this very strong argument that there's bad guys out there, they're doing bad things, and we are going to be in solidarity and overcome them and force through change. So that's the traditional left-wing political orientation. It has this certain logic. You know, people say that you have to politicize it. In other words, you have to make it a space of social conflict, right? And of course, they're half right? So this is nuanced, okay? Don't jump to black and white. I'm going to unpack that a little bit, because yes, there are bad people doing bad things, absolutely. And yes, absolutely, there has to be social conflict, right? Because that's how political change works. And at the same time, the objective reality of the situation is this is not fundamentally a question of interests. It's a question of human survival.
There's a sense in which we really are all in it together.
There's a sense, and I think what we're trying to say here, before we get, pigeonholed, is it's a sense. In other words, it's not an absolutist reality. No. It's not like saying all that's out there is human race, they either survive or they don't. That's ridiculous. That's an element of what we face. Another element of it is the social inequality. And some people are going to die before other people. That's absolutely correct as well. So there's the two things. So the correct analysis is there's both.
Totally
agree. And therefore, you can't totally go over to one or totally go over to the other. So it's, yes, the political is important, but it's not the only show, it's not the only game in town in terms of valid analysis. There's another valid analysis, or another analysis that has to enter into the frame, which is this, to continue our analogy, it's the World War II Popular Front analysis, which is we are facing something which is so supremely evil, so supremely, ugly, unjust, that anyone who has any semblance of common decency, any attachment to human values, has to be absolutely appalled, objectively, And what that means is that's an opening to people who have, I'm going to call it, different cultural orientations. That's a broad description, right? I don't want to get reduced into going, how do we appeal to right-wingers? Like, as soon as you construct it like that, it's like you're back to that old style binary politics, there's the right-wing people and there's left-wing people. That's really reductive crap politics, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's got some validity, but it's not the only game in town. The fact of the matter is, as you probably know, most individuals in society only think about politics 5 minutes a week, right? What it means to be human is to have all sorts of orientations. Sometimes you're political, sometimes you're spiritual, sometimes you're cultural. You have you flip between different things, and then within those self-identities, you have internal conflicts. You have, I'm a conservative, but I'm not quite sure about that, and I mean, you just had that MP that's flipped out, and joined the Labour Party yesterday. I mean, it's a classic example that there's more going on in the human psyche than, this reductive left-wing analysis of the world. There's people that is unequal, and there's people against equality and people, for it. That's absolutely a critical part of describing the social space, but it's not the only thing that's going on. For instance, fear of death. That's not political, right? But it's a massive part of the human experience. And we know, for instance, just concretise it before I start. I've talked to conservatives with a little c, let's say, or let's say people with a conservative culture. And let's acknowledge that there's people on the left with conservative cultures. They want society to stay the same. They want to go to the pub and have a pint. They're not particularly interested in various, issues which young people bring up, blah, 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 rightly or wrongly. There's all those people out there. And when I go and talk with them, right, this is in my strategy is I'm listening to them, I'm repeating back. So I create, like you say, a rapport, right? You've got to create this rapport. And then you can, without sounding too manipulative, the fact of the matter is once you've made the rapport, you can start deconstructing the contradictions within their position, within their own frame. And, just to finish.
Bringing out how, for example, conservatism ought to mean things like conservation.
Well, it's in the name, guys. It's like, you're a conservative, and so you're going to destroy the human race. Like, that doesn't really fit together, does it? With all due respect. It's like, and there's, to expand that a little bit, in the left-wing space, there's structural contradictions. Let's face it, there's a big contradictions between freedom and equality, for instance, which have a long lineage, and no one quite knows how to sort that out. But in the conservative space, there's structural contradictions, and the central structural contradiction of conservatism, widely defined, is you're into capitalism, you're into the free market, you're into people making money, you're into people getting on in their life, well, maybe fair enough, and capitalism is destroying family values, social values, community. Well, that's a problem, because the other side of the conservative equation is we just want to go to the pub and have a pint. We want things to stay the same, rightly or wrongly. So that's the cleaverage, I think, in this strategy with the broadly defined conservative space.
Agreed. And so we might say that with conservatives, typically the Achilles heel is the free market dogma, which stands in the way of achieving their other values. With people on the left, my experience is that typically the analogous problem is a dogma of progress, dogma of endless kind of human progress, typically expressed through notions of endless economic growth and distribution of equal distribution of an ever-widening pie, and that's how you get to these kind of completely absurd ideas like fully automated luxury communism, which I think is a disastrous thing to be aiming for, because it would be ecologically.
Well, it'd be nice if it wasn't for climate change.
It'd be nice if it was possible, but it's completely not possible. So
Sorry, I missed that one. that possibility is no longer on the table.
Sadly so. I mean, to come back to what we were saying earlier about the Second World War, it seems to me that's the great precedent here. So Popular Front, also the concept of a national government, which can be quite appealing to people on the right potentially. And the point being, when so earlier I was saying, look, there's some real disanalogies between our situation and the Second World War, but there's also these real analogies, and they're profoundly important. If we can appeal to people in terms of what is necessary, then they may be able to start to see how some of the things that they are committed to, the dogma of progress, the dogma of endless growth, the dogma of free market for folk on the right, they may start to see how some of those things are actually getting in the way of their other values. Now this is difficult, and this is going to involve people in complex processes of kind of reassessment and retrenchment and so on. But I guess what you and I both think is this is possible, and certainly if we are going to achieve the kind of shift, whether it's as quick as you think or a little bit slower as I think, but the transformative shift that is coming, if we don't get the kind that we want, we're going to get the collapsing kind that we don't want.
I think this is the critical dynamite point. It's not like, let's choose between two options. There's only one option, which is complete transformation.
Yeah.
You're either going to get it brutally, or you're going to get it through some democratic, deliberative form.
Yeah.
The status quo is no longer
the prolongation of that is not an option.
And then you've got this. This is the critical point where I think I'm going to suggest they're going to flip, of course, to continue my analysis. The flip point is when they go, by pursuing capitalism, I'm actually going to destroy it. In other words, like the old paradigm is, I'm a capitalist, I'm a right winger. I think free market's great. I think capitalism's great because it's going to promote capitalism and it's going to promote my values. You over there are trying to destroy capitalism, and you're trying to stop people, getting on with their lives, and blah blah blah. We know that. That's fairyland, right? The reality is, I either go through fundamental transformation, and capitalism's got to go through a fundamental transformation, i.e., there has to be a socialistic explosion in the space. In other words, like you said, you put it very well at the beginning. When people in World War II agreed to a socialistic orientated society, that's not because they were socialists. It's because if you don't do that, you're going to lose the war.
Yeah.
You have to go into the factories and say, sorry guys, you've got to build tanks.
Yeah.
There's no free market here.
No.
We haven't got the time. Hitler's in Dunkirk. Tough.
My favourite story is Roosevelt goes to the American car manufacturers and says to them, right, after Pearl Harbor, right, here's your plans for what you're going to produce in the next few years in terms of, tanks and planes and so on. And they looked at the plans for a while and they said, Mr. President, there must be some mistake here. If we do all this, we won't be able to produce any cars for the next few years. And he's like, yep, you got it.
Yeah. But the key point is this is the critical point. Unless you produce tanks now, you'll never produce any more cars. Ever for the next 100,000 years. Yeah. That's the point. I mean, I've talked to one or two Tory MPs, as you know, about this, and this is the point where you can see them grinding away in their brain, which is the more that the old strategy is actually producing the opposite results of what I want. In other words, the more I pursue capitalism, the quicker I'm going to destroy it.
And the quicker I destroy
and that's the flip point
as well.
And the quicker you're going to destroy the freedoms, the quicker you're going to destroy the whole libertarian agenda. Yeah. It's a suicidal strategy.
So we've got this like difference still on timescales. I'm skeptical that we're going to get any significant number of right-leaning folks or conservative working class type people, etc., getting into civil resistance anytime soon. I think we can get some into the moderate flank soon. And I think the key point really is that we're agreed in thinking what you absolutely mustn't have is all those people continuing to dogmatically oppose you. You've got to give them ways of at least coming into this sort of soft underbelly of sort of general support, kind of somehow kind of getting it. I don't really want to be doing this, but I realize that actually we kind of have to do something like this because the world has fundamentally changed. We've at the very least, in terms of my iceberg metaphor, we've got to get quite a lot of these people into the point of being there below the surface, keeping us buoyant, not kind of pulling us down to destruction.
Yeah. Well, that's the other side of this proposition, isn't it? And this is nothing to do with politics. It's about the dynamics of human conflict, which is, if you're not talking to these guys, or rather, if you're not listening to them and in dialogue with them, then you're going to get overpolarization.
Yes.
And people make connections not over political ideology, but over face-to-face human communication. And this is what the left doesn't understand a lot of the time as well, which is most people are not political. Most people are tribal. It's like,
Yeah.
I need an identity. I've been provided with an identity by a right-wing ideology, and I'm never going to get out of it through argument. But what I am going to do is, if you come and be decent to me, i.e., let's concretize it, you're going to sit in a room, listen to them, and then evolve, some discussion around their frames. At the end of it, they're going to shake your hand, right? Whatever he's called, Nigel Farage, right? Come off, I was civil with him. I thought he was talking utter bollocks, but it didn't matter. I was in that space.
Yeah.
He shook hands with me, right?
Yeah, and we also get to have the moral high ground that way, and their attempts to kind of drag us down into a sort of bickering match don't work. The right understand that culture is usually upstream of politics, and I think part of what we're talking about is a civic culture. And the cultural transformation which involves people gradually or not so gradually, increasingly coming to understand this really is it. These criteria for the permanent emergency have to start to trump these things that have felt important to you, but they're not the only things that are important to you, and actually they're not the things that are most important to you.
Yeah. So I think strategically for me, there's two things going on. One is, if you look at all the comments when I went on Nigel Farage, it was like, twat, cunt sort of stuff, right? But there were quite a lot of people going, this guy's a nutter, but I applaud him for having the guts to come and talk to Nigel. So what this provides is this, if we're not going to have civil wars, we're going to have to show our fearless dialogical commitment to the other side. So that they see our humanity. Yeah. And that's going to prevent a degeneration into social violence.
And we really need to be talking to people like Ben Goldsmith, for example, of the Conservative Environment Network, right? He's the kind of guy who is trying to do what he can within the constraints of a sort of conservative ideology to be serious about starting to kind of chip away in this direction. We don't help him by saying things like, all conservatives are wankers, or if you're not woke, you're a wanker, or something. We do help him by being ready to step into the space of talking with him, by sitting down at the table of politics with him, and by starting to kind of make clear, you know what, conservatives really are human beings too, and they have children, and it's through things like that that we can start to form common ground with them, while keeping in mind what I thought you put very well, Roger, the kind of two realities of at one and the same time, we are all in this together and we are not all in this together. We are not all as equal as each other. Both are true. And we need to try to sort of take people from this side over to this side as much as we can and get them to understand that the more they stay on this side, the more fucked we all are, because there is no future that is as radically unequal as the future we have now. It's just not possible. Yeah. It's just not possible to have people continuing to, use private jets en masse, etc., and actually have a future.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously we're agreeing with each other too much here. So I'm going to say something a little bit. I hate these videos where people go, "Yeah, you're right," and we're all agreed. It's so boring, isn't it? It's this whole I
think we've had this thread of disagreement.
We've had quite a lot of disagreement. That's good. But I'm just going to throw a little curveball into your, which connects with our previous disagreement, which is, I think something that's quite interesting and counterintuitive is it's not the moderate green conservatives that are actually going to make this shift, right? Okay. This is an empirical observation in the sense that if it's not true, it's not true. But what I've noticed is, a lot of the light green conservatives are actually neoliberal liberals. They actually still buy in to this whole fantasy of growth. And what they're saying is we can have growth, but we can have a little bit of greenery here and there, right? And they count, how people are. If people have that ideology, they're not going to get out of it without too much difficulty. Now, I want to identify. So I think we need to be smart about the conservative space. It's intellectually lazy to just go, that's the conservatives and they're bad. It's like, no. We need to be smarter. We need to be thinking, okay, which are the different sub-tribes in the conservative space? And I'm talking not about the Conservative Party necessarily. Yeah. I'm talking about the broader cultural space. There's this other group, and this other group has no interest in the environment. right? And they're what I would call one nation conservatives.
Yes.
It's like, it's humanity, it's bringing on the nation.
Heritage.
It's heritage, it's the nation, it's patriotism, it's, you know, it's not it's not vicious. Let's not, you know, let's have enough nuance. These aren't fascists. They're one nation conservatives. You know, they fought in Second World War against the, you know. So again, we need to be nuanced on that as well. But the thing about that group, and the thing why I think it's that group that's going to flip, and I'm going to say flip, is because they're intelligent enough to know that capitalism is not God, right? They're intelligent enough because their culture tells them, their tradition tells them that, as Adam Smith says, you don't allow the merchant class to take over the state. Because the merchant class is great at producing wealth, it's not that cool at ruling because it fundamentally believes in the private interest. And the conservative anti-capitalist tradition, as it were, is the state is the main show. And you need the state to discipline capitalism, otherwise the whole thing collapses, right? It's a completely respectable view in the longer stream of conservative thought. So what my proposition to you, and I've actually talked to some of these guys, so it's not like I'm making this up, and this is what they're thinking about is, oh fuck, we're going to destroy Britain. You know, oh my God. You know, 1.5 is the collapse of a global trading system for a start. That's not going to be too good for a trading nation. Number two is the whole infrastructure is going to collapse at 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees. That means, you know, we're looking at London out of this window, aren't we? And it's like, what is it? 25 to 50% of the housing stock of London's going to be subsiding by 2050? That's not a one nation conservative orientation. And what I'm predicting, and this is the game plan, is that those people will in other words, it will be the realists. It will be the old-fashioned realists. And as you may know, I've talked to this guy who did his book called, I've forgotten his name now, Climate Change and the Nation State. And, you know, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you know, he's a nationalist. And I'm not saying he's God or anything, but he's making a really important point, which is part of this alliance is going to involve patriotic conservatives who are sceptical or even utterly opposed to global capitalism. And that's going to have to be part. That's the same as that radical socialist having to be in the trenches with a conservative Catholic, right? It's like, who is that guy? You know, I hate him, but we're going to have to do this together. And this is part of avoiding the Civil War scenario.
Interesting. Yeah, I think there might be a both and. So yeah, you've got the sort of red Tory thing, you've got Disraeli, and then you've got people like, I used to debate and dialogue with Roger Scruton, who thought of himself as a green conservative, and he was interested in conservative philosophy. And there are elements of conservative philosophy which are completely potentially able to point in the kind of direction that we want here. You know, there's some elements of conservative philosophy which are about people hanging on to their money, which are not so brilliant. But there are elements which are to do with conservation, which are to do with being able to continue the kind of way of life that we've had, that can be appealed to as a basis for being green. And as you say, my analysis for many years has been that the real problem has been the takeover by neoliberalism of conservatism and, of course, to a large extent, of the Labour Party. Well, this is a fracture, you know. Like the conventional political space, it's like a what's it called? A straitjacket, right? It's like you have to be left wing, you have to be right wing, and you can see the logic because you know you have a solidarity logic. Is everyone's got to stay together. And, you know, that logic's got a lot going for it. But it's got this dark side, which is, it corrupts itself. It's like, you've got a really good idea. No, we're not having new ideas. Or, oh, there's a little bit of a fracture there. Oh, no, we've got to paper over that fracture. But the fact of the matter is, you know, political and social change, sociologically, is all about new fractures in society. You know, it used to be church and state, then it was left wing and right wing. What I think the fracture in the 21st century is not that those are going away. The left wing, right wing, it's not going to go away, but it's not going to be the only game in town. No. And arguably the biggest game in town is ecological realism and neoliberal fantasy. Good.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And we all know, let's be honest with ourselves, let's be honest with our audience here, the left wing space is full of anti-nature, imperialistic arrogance.
Yep.
It's like the world's out there, the natural world's out there, and we can shit on it, we can rape on it, we can raid it, and we don't care.
Yeah, it's
you know?
anthropocentrism run wild.
It is.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the root, the neoliberal root goes back to the Enlightenment, does it not? We know this, right? Of saying everything's centered around the human race, and we know, you know, it had a good side to it, which is we want humanity to get richer, and that's all, but it has this distinctive dark side to it, which is the denigration of the world outside the human space.
Okay.
And that's suicidal in 2022.
Totally agreed, and that's a lovely kind of place at which to maybe head towards a conclusion here. That we're talking now about a sort of bigger kind of post-anthropocentric vision, which is taking what we can take from the Enlightenment, but leaving the dark side of the Enlightenment behind. We said when we started that we might try to end this with just a few minutes on thinking about, well, how is what the kind of thing that we're talking about here and the kind of stuff that we've tried to be doing and still are, how is it going to be seen historically? If there are people to write history in 2100 or 2200, what kinds of things are they going to say? And if you're watching this, you know, you may well be a rebel, or you may be someone who's just waking up on climate or whatever. You're thinking, what am I getting involved with here? What this movement or movements that we're talking about here, how are they going to appear to posterity? So, you know, what can we say about, what words of wisdom can we leave our viewers with on this, Roger, as we draw towards a close here?
I don't think we should say words of wisdom. That's a little bit presumptive, isn't it?
In philosophy, I'm a philosopher. We try to
deluded, individualistic fantasies have we got?
In philosophy, we try to seek wisdom. That's the beauty of the etymology of the word philosophy.
Oh, right, okay.
Wisdom.
That sounds a little bit. That sounds a little bit more self-depreciative, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it could all be bollocks, couldn't it? But who knows? But well, I just want to throw in something I've been thinking about last fortnight. I think this is an interesting perspective. I never can remember any names, but basically, people think it's weird. But I've been watching these videos from a Catholic theologian, dare I say it, and it's interesting. At times of rapid political change, you know, the people with the greatest wisdom are often people outside the space, traditions which have been denigrated. And you know, I've always been interested in Catholic social thought. I'm not buying it, right? Don't get me wrong, right? I'm not going to become a Catholic. But there's something in that tradition which I think's really wise. And what she's saying, to somewhat simplify, is the question here, you know, in the green space, there's this idea, there's this orthodoxy that the transformation is that we're going to make our peace with nature. We're going to realise we're part of nature. We're going to treat nature well, and it's all going to be hunky-dory, right? Because we're integrated, right? And, you know, it's got stuff going for it, so I'm not... But I think there's another sort of transformatory thing, which I think's arguably deeper, which is, and what this theologian was saying is, and, you know, lots of people have said this, guys, like, the problem isn't nature. Nature's fine. Nature's going to be carrying on for the next 4 billion years, right? Yeah. The problem is the fucking human race, guys. It's like, what the hell are we going to make of ourselves? Yes. And that question, what does it mean to be human? I mean, we're not going to. I just want to say,
we're not going to sort that.
I don't. You know, my day job is where to put the biscuits on the table. You know, when people come into the mobilisation meeting. So I'm just allowing myself some speculation here for the last 10 minutes, right? You know, but this is my speculative proposition. Is that once you ask that meta question, which is, what is it about humans that makes us want to destroy ourselves? Because that's how we should frame it. It's not like we're destroying nature. You know, no, we are nature. We are destroying ourselves, and nature's going to carry on. So really, the focus should not necessarily, or exclusively anyway, be on our relationship to nature. The real question is, who is it? What is it to be human? And then that opens up a whole new literature, existentialism, you know, religious theology, you know, wisdom traditions, indigenous traditions. And we need to bring those in to this key question. And in some ways, this is a really amazing opportunity, without sounding too hippie about it, for us to transform ourselves as the human race.
Absolutely.
That we no longer want to hate ourselves and hate each other to the extent of human extinction. That we're going to come back from that, because let's face it, right? You know, there's plenty of literature on this. Human beings do hate themselves. They hate existence. They hate each other. They kill each other. They kill themselves. You know, we've got this dark side, and there's good reasons for it, right? I mean, we're thrown into existence. We've got all these instincts. We've got, you know, these passions. We get life disappointments. People we love die. Tragedy happens. Then we've got to die. It's not great. Whoever put us into this position has got something to answer for, right? So what Catholic social thought is, and all these wisdom traditions, are really ways of constructing the human, which gives us a break.
Yeah, I like that.
You know what I mean? On some level, saying, you know, it's actually okay. Let's love each other a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of reference points for me there. One would be the Pope and Cardinal Turkson, who wrote the Laudato Si, which is a really great document of ecological thinking and spiritual thinking at the same time. Another, I've just read David Graeber's last book, The Dawn of Everything, which I'd really recommend to people as a wonderful sort of hymn to human agency and to the potentiality that we can remake ourselves and remake our societies and our institutions, which is a kind of optimism of the will that I think we need at this moment in history. So building on what you said there, Roger, which I think is really, really very profound, frankly, actually. I think you've done a bit of wisdom seeking there successfully. I would say...
I read it all in a book.
Yeah, I'd say this. I'd say we can, I think, know that if, as seems at least possible, we are part of achieving this transformation that has to come, that history will judge us kindly. But there's two really crucial ways that we can't know how history will judge us. And they're these. Firstly, if there is going to be this transformation, which is going to be paradigmatic and wide and deep and ultimately ethical and spiritual, people in the future are probably going to have somewhat different values and ways of seeing things from us. And the way they look back, it's going to be from a position that is quite different from the position that we currently inhabit. And the second way we can't know how history will judge us is that, and this is the building on the point specifically that you made, we are going to change in the process, in getting towards that. And the most crucial part of the change of all, arguably, is who are we going to be right now? You know, who are we prepared to be? How are we prepared to step up or not right now? And that is going to change us. That is going to be a process of transformation. That is a sense in which people who say you've got to be the change you want to see in the world are right. That is connected with the way that getting involved in something like Extinction Rebellion is and is experienced as being transformative and prefigurative for people who do it. That's very widely experienced, I think. So that's something that's kind of, I think, quite exciting and encouraging about kind of the context in which this kind of discussion that we've been trying to have should be seen. That ultimately this is about who are we going to be, who are we prepared to be, what is humanity going to mean as it gets manifested by us at this moment.
Yeah, and I think another major challenge to our culture is this infantile notion that suffering is simplistically bad. You know, that obviously who wants anyone to suffer? It's a no-brainer. That's not what we're saying. Yeah. What we're saying is in the human experience, the pathway to wisdom is suffering. You know, inevitable suffering that life involves. And we should get out of this idea that social conflict, you know, despair, depression, all these things are simplistically bad. What in the human experience, they're pathways to what I would call the the destruction of the ego. You know, you hate yourself, you hate the world.
Yeah.
You have an existential moment where you go, do I want to live like this, or do I want to renew myself in humility, knowing I'm a shit? You see what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And you see this all the time, you know, which is one of the reasons why people that have had a hard life are actually very wise, is because they know they're rubbish. You know, they know they've fucked up, and they know they've gone through this extremity of despair about themselves and about the world. And I'm not fetishizing it, right? Because we all know that can lead to suicide and violence and all the rest of it. And at the same time, it provides the potentiality, and arguably, it's an essential process of psychic, social, individual change.
Yeah.
Where people go, I'm now in service. I get, you know, this is what keeps me going anyway.
Yeah.
And I know it's for other activists that work really hard. It's like, we get up in the morning, we're in service to the common good.
Yeah.
And that's it. If the whole thing collapses, I'm not going to take that on my shoulders. You know, if I don't succeed, then so be it. I've not succeeded on so much in my life. I'm not out to succeed fundamentally. I'm out to get up in the morning and use all my gifts and faculties to try and save humanity.
Yeah.
And that's the miracle. This is why we need to revisit our theological, religious and spiritual traditions. Not because we're going to become some 14th century Catholic, right? And make a nuanced point, but so that we can start to rediscover the intensity of what it means to be human, other than this superficial bollocks we've been sold for 30 years that, you know, we work, we spend money, we consume, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
It's not, is it?
No.
So, you know, that's the, for me, like, that's the invitation to people is it's about us as individuals. It's not like about saving the world. That's what I'm trying to say. Obviously, it is on one level.
Yeah.
But it's fundamentally about what sort of human being do you want to be?
Yeah.
Do you want to be true to yourself?
Yeah. Fundamentally agreed. Great to end on a point of agreement, and I hope that people take away from this the sense of how you can disagree respectfully, and maybe this has been a little bit about what it's like to be a human being, and to be able to appreciate it amidst all the horrors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I've tried to sort of allude to in this, session with you, is there's this rational level of we're having an argument, we're disagreeing with each other, but really the most fundamental point about this session is we're sitting down talking to each other. That's the main communication in a way to this audience, and what we're doing is modelling what humanity is best, hopefully, is, which is people are always going to disagree, and I do fundamentally disagree with you, right? Let's not beat around the bush. It's important. And at the same time, we have enough humanity in common that we're going to sit down and, and map it out, right?
Yeah.
Map it out.
And hopefully you all watching this can continue to model that yourselves. We hope the comments on this video might be respectful. That would be something to hope for. And, and we hope that you'll find this useful in the important work that we know that many of you are trying to do along with us at this difficult and fantastic time. Roger.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much, everyone.
Don't watch the news, be the news. Don't wait for the movement. Move!